I am introducing tonight's lecture by Ingrid Schaffner. She is our 2019 Aspen Art Museum Curator in Residence, and our gratitude always goes out to the Questrom Education Fund for making this lecture free, as well as thanks to the Laffey McHugh Foundation. So Ingrid's lecture is being presented as part of a new special public program series that we're calling the Legacy Lectures, and this is the first of a few that we'll do between now and when we celebrate the 5th anniversary of our building this summer. So this year, you've probably heard me say 2019 is 5 plus 15 equals 40, and then I paused to say we're not bad at math, but it's 5 years in this building, 15 years of Art Crush, and 40 years since the founding of the Aspen Art Museum. So the idea is that these lectures will examine the legacy of luminaries who have shaped art and culture and that sector and how it has affected our lives. So not necessarily connected to our own personal history. Though Ingrid was here before and was the curator of the amazing Karen Kalimnik show that we did in the old building about 10 years ago. So we filmed in Art Matters today and we were reminiscing about her previous visit here. So a brief introduction to Ingrid. Native of Pittsburgh. I didn't know that. Okay. Studied art history at Mount Holyoke and was part of the Whitney's ISP program, received her master's in art history from NYU's Institute of Fine Art. And her curatorial practice has a very broad reach, including work as the Chief Curator of the ICA Philadelphia at the University of Pennsylvania for 15 years. And independent projects that have totaled authorship of over 20 books and 200 articles. Most recently, she curated the 57th Carnegie International, which opened in 2018. It is the oldest exhibition of international contemporary art in North America and the second oldest in the world, following the Venice Biennale by just a year, I think. So I'm sure you will enjoy her presentation, and then she'll take some questions. And without further ado, please join me in welcoming Ingrid.
Thank you, Heidi. Thank you. Can you hear me if I just talk?
Yeah.
The camera won't be able to record the sound. Oh. Okay. This mic's for you. So, the title of my talk is Carnegie International in the Bardo. In Tibetan Buddhism, the Bardo is the place between life and death. It's the space between being on Earth and then being on Earth again. And it's a kind of perfect metaphor for where I am right now with the Carnegie International, which closed last Monday. So we're kind of in the Bardo right now with the Carnegie International. We're deinstalling. And so I thought, with tonight's talk, we just kind of like ghosts walk through this exhibition, which is about to vanish. So where on earth are we? We're in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Pittsburgh is the city famously of 3 rivers. It's in Appalachia. It has a very particular topography. It was known as the Paris of Appalachia back in the day. And this is the facade of the Carnegie Museum of Art with the work by El Anatsui, who is an artist from Ghana who's based in Nigeria. And I invited El to create a work. Yeah, please sit up towards front because pull up a chair. To create a work for the facade of the building to announce that the Carnegie International is in the house. And so this sculpture is all made of recycled metal, and it's like this mantle that covers the facade of our beautiful brutalist architecture, a building built in 1974 by Edward Larrabee Barnes, who had just finished the Walker. And you see here on the plaza is this great Richard Serra sculpture thrusting up to the sky. So, here it is naked. And when El came to visit to think about what he would do for the International, he was very struck by how the Corten steel of the Serra kind of blends into the stone of the building. So with the work that he created, here's a detail, it has 3 elements. This is kind of Elle's signature materiality. These are hundreds of thousands of bottle caps that are all held together with little pieces of wire to create this almost like fabric cloth or metal cloth. And then these are printing plates from the Pittsburgh local commercial printer. And so this is kind of the fabric for this piece. And in inviting Elle to participate, for me, it was about this sort of mantle that Elle would bring to the International that would connect our exhibition to other major international exhibitions. So this is Elle at the Venice Biennale. This is Elle's work that he made for the Marrakesh Biennial. This is over years, over a decade. Here's the Royal Academy in London. And this opened subsequent to the International. This is the Hausterkunst in Munich, where Elle created a work using printing plates from a local press in Munich. And the Hausterkunst right now is hosting the first major survey of Elle's work, and it's called Triumphant Scale. I think you can see why. So I had this idea of Elle's work connecting us to a global art world with this piece that he created for us. And he talks about, so here behind the Serra, he used a reflective material to really bring light, to sort of dissolve the building and bring light behind the Serra, so it kind of feels released from the building. And then he's balancing it with his own, this materiality of his, the bottle cap element, and then here this, the printing plates in between. And see how they're creased and folded? For Elle, that was a response to the topography of Pittsburgh itself, that kind of, the sense of confluence. And the piece is called Three Angles. So he made this magnificent sculpture for the facade of the Carnegie International, and it will soon be snipped and coming down off the front of the building will be naked again. So you came into the building and you were greeted by this billboard pair of images by a photographer from Kenya, Mimi Chirona Nyok. And Mimi had always wanted to work at billboard scale. This incredible pair of images. She is a very peripatetic photographer. She's always traveling through residencies or exhibition opportunities. And there's a sense of scale, like photography traveling with her. So here at this sort of monumental scale. And then this was the folded up exhibition plan. So everybody got to take home a photograph by Mimi, was on the back of the plan. You can see the folds and creases. So there was pocket size and billboard size. And this was the plan that showed the footprint of the International in the museum. And it folded up to something about yo big. And yes, there was a plan, but there was no particular way you had to move through the International. Usually when I took people on a tour, I'm taking you on a tour, we'd start with the one and only wall text for the whole exhibition. There it is. It was like this sort of billboard. And it simply said, welcome to the Carnegie International. It said there is not a theme. So I didn't spend 3 years going around the world trying to find some theme that was going to unite the world of art today. But there are conditions, and the idea that contemporary artists live in the same world we do. It's a world of shifting terrain, of of the effects of climate change, the effects of late capitalism. We're in a moment right now where there are more people on the move than ever before on Earth. So this sort of tension around the word international itself as being one of the conditions that artists brought to the exhibition. And then there is the International itself, the Carnegie International, which I was very mindful of in organizing the show. So this lobby space I transformed into, in my mind, as a sort of street of art. And on the street, this is work by Thaddeus Mosley, who is an artist based in Pittsburgh. He was one of my first studio visits. And Thaddeus talked very eloquently when we visited in his studio about how for him as an artist based in Pittsburgh, an artist who's not, who's known regionally, who's treasured regionally, the museum has collected the work, shown the work over the years, but Thaddeus Mosley does not have a national or international reputation. And he talked about how important it was for him that a place like the Carnegie was bringing art from around the world to Pittsburgh for him to experience. And he said, specifically, the 1958 Carnegie International, here's the catalog, introduced him to the work of Isamu Noguchi, and which inspired him to pick up a chisel and start carving abstract sculpture. Thaddeus is 93. He's in his studio every day. This is almost like a little survey of work. This one he finished just in time for the show. And you can see the work was both inside and outside. And so another kind of move by locating Thaddeus here is one of the first, it was a sort of assertion of Pittsburgh as an international city for creativity, but also that as viewers, it had us turn and look at this beautiful sculpture courtyard that kind of celebrating the museum itself was also on my agenda. And here's Thaddeus's work over the seasons. The exhibition opened in October, and a little dusting of Pittsburgh winter. So then on the street, facing Thaddeus, was a comic strip, a 70-foot-long work by Kerry James Marshall. Kerry James Marshall participated in the 1999 Carnegie International. And I don't know if you're familiar with Kerry James Marshall's work. The Metropolitan Museum of Art, no less, just mounted a survey of Kerry's work, his paintings, and it was called simply Mastery. So Kerry James Marshall is a great American artist and known for his figurative paintings. 1999 Carnegie International, however, he began what has evolved for him to be a very important body of work, the Rhythm Master comics. So the first issue of Rhythm Master was disseminated by the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Pittsburghers one Sunday got volume 1 of the Rhythm Master, and then so there were 4 issues that were distributed over the course of the International. So I asked Kerry to return to Rhythm Master 1, so his participation in 1999, to kind of go back to that moment with this International and revisit that work. And he said, and that's really interesting, Ingrid, because I've been wanting to redraw number 1 and bring it into the language, the graphic language that I've evolved for the Rhythm Master series, which is now a series of 4 different narratives that are very intentionally bringing Black narrative into the American comic book genre. So here's a detail of the strip. And Kerry said that this redrawing is also, it's not looking like the Sunday Funnies anymore. And this scale of the frames is very specifically about Panavision. So for Kerry, this is a step towards turning Rhythm Master into a feature film. So one moment in this strip, we're in the art world and we're at an opening, and this woman says to this man, I saw the painting he made from this drawing in a show at the Carnegie last year. So this painting is the painting that the Carnegie Museum acquired in 2016 by Kerry James Marshall. So he's kind of drawing his ongoing history with the Carnegie Museum into the strip. And here is Kerry James Marshall conducting a drawing session with us Pittsburghers as part of the Carnegie International. I initiated a series of public programs in the form of drawing sessions. And these sessions began long before the exhibition opened, and they ran right on through the exhibition itself. There were 35 in all. So here's Kerry James talking about his drawing practice, and here we are with our drawing boards, and here we are with the drawings that we made, getting a critique from Kerry James Marshall. It was pretty magnificent, kind of like having Leonardo da Vinci come draw with you. Here's the first drawing session, which I conducted in the museum's magnificent Hall of Sculpture, and it was a big public sort of scrum of the Exquisite Corpse drawing game, which we did with collage and pencil and all different ways. And these drawing sessions, we documented them online. There's all 35 of them. They had this kooky name, the Tam O'Shanter Drawing Sessions. And they took their name from, in 1929, the Carnegie Museum started having free art classes for children. And a tam o' shanter is a sort of Scottish beret. So here's kids wearing the little paper hats. And generations of children learned to draw at the Carnegie Museum, including a young Andy Warhol was a tam o' shanter. So we rebooted this retro name and adapted it for the International to do improvisations on drawing. So the sessions were big and small. Here's a more intimate session in the museum's library with Magali Areola, who was the curator in residence last year, yes? And Magali contributed to my exhibition as a research companion. So here she is with a Pittsburgh mix of, she had us go into the Museum of Natural History and draw clues from, I guess, the crime of taxidermy. So here's a young man drawing some clues. And the Carnegie Museum of Art is under one roof with the Carnegie Museum of Natural History. So we have our Richard Serra, and they have their dinosaur, kind of its museum bookended by the Anthropocene. And here's, the museum is actually referred to as the immense building. So here's the Art Museum, Natural History, the Carnegie Library, and there's also a Carnegie theater here, music hall. So past internationals have moved out into the city. This one I really wanted to just be in and of the museum and sort of draw the energy of the contemporary into this great battery of a museum of museums. So here we are back on the street, and we're going to go into this space here where we see John Rubin and Lenka Clayton, Pittsburgh-based artists who do have national to international careers. They collaboratively did a project that inaugurated the Guggenheim Museum's social practice series in 2016. So I asked John and Lenka to activate this first sort of gallery space within the International. And they conducted a lot of research. We talked about different approaches, and in the end, they created this kind of painting studio factory, so that whenever the museum was open, you'd find two painters at work, not necessarily John and Lenka. And what are they doing? They are, so John and Lenka, for themselves, discovered this archive of the Carnegie International's early history. It was a painting annual. Artists submitted paintings to be considered, and if you were, you would either get accepted, A, or rejected, R. And the museum kept record of all of the A's and the R's by title. So John and Lenka were very drawn to all of the R's. John said, as an artist who's been rejected many times himself, he wanted to champion those rejects. So they're taking the rejected titles and turning them into paintings on paper, text-based paintings on paper. So when they're done making a painting, they would go into one of the holsters, and then the painting that was in this holster would then be available for a visitor to take home. There were 10,632 rejected titles that they made, and they were alphabetized, so they made their way through the list in this sort of, like I said, like studio factory. And when the exhibition opened, the stack of paper was over 6 feet tall and kind of functioned like a clock, because as the painting went on, this went like an egg timer kind of. And John and Lenka's idea was that the paintings would stack up here and visitors could go through like record bins, but pretty much as soon as something came off the wall, somebody would snatch it and take it home. The project was called Fruit and Other Things. So here we are on the last day of the Carnegie International, about 4:48 in the afternoon. Museum's about to close at 5. They've timed it perfectly, so the last zinnias is being painted. Here are happy visitors. And so here's that clock, empty, the last piece of paper, the last zinnias. And this was the team of painters that we hired that were working round the clock to make Fruit and Other Things. So now we're going to ascend. This is a Solowit wall drawing from a 1985 Carnegie International, which has remained permanent. And sort of picking us up here at the top of the ramp is a painting by Sarah Crowner. And it leads us right through the wall into the first gallery. And I'm going to stop here, and I'm going to introduce you to my team. This is Ashley McNeilis and Liz Park, Associate Curator, Curatorial Assistant. When you do the Carnegie International, it's like building an institution within the institution. I hired my own team. You come up with your own way of doing everything, from publications to wall labels. You make this exhibition. So there's the small but mighty team. So across from Sarah Crowner's painting made of tile are these paintings by Ulrika Muller, which are carpets. She works with weavers in Oaxaca. Sarah works with ceramicists in Guadalajara. And so this sort of first, sort of first procession in the International, I thought of as sort of checking in on conditions of painting today. So to have Ulrika and Sarah, who identify as painters, but are working with not oil on canvas, but different sort of applied arts mediums, materialities, craft, abstraction, architecture with Sarah's work, figuration, the body with Ulrika, sort of in conversation. Now we're moving into painting. This is Rachel Rose, a video installation by Rachel Rose, who trained as a painter and moved into film and video because she couldn't get what she needed from painting. But she was really happy to have her video shown like a painting, with painting all around it, not in a dark room, but here in the space that she created for this animation, which kind of appears like a painting on the wall. And then you moved into space with the figurative painting of Lynette Yadom Boake, an artist of Ghanaian heritage, British-born, lives and works in London. So these are not African Americans. They are black figures, and they are painted from Lynette's imagination. She doesn't work from models. She works from references to imagery of the figure. And it was Lynette who specified that we paint the walls this magnolia color. Ulrika had specified the color, that dark color in the first gallery, for the paintings to hang. And I think we get a sense of why. With this painting, you can see the corners have that same magnolia color, and it kind of has this effect of releasing those figures into our space. And then there were other paintings where people in spaces where you couldn't go. So there was these sort of different intimacies that she staged, and she truly staged this installation. She made all new work. She sent more paintings than she ended up showing. There was a day of her editing, moving them around. Even just, you can feel how low they hang. There's a sense of this being a sort of tableau. So the museum acquired this painting for the collection, and Lynette was the Carnegie Prize winner. So since 1896, since the first Carnegie International, someone gets a prize. Tiffany designed this ostentatious medal that somebody goes home with, along with $10,000. So Lynette was the prize winner, and there's a nice kind of recursiveness back to the first International. Winslow Homer was the Carnegie Prize winner. And if you go to the museum, the work that has accession number 1 for the entire museum's collection is this work by Winslow Homer that came from the Carnegie International. So the International has been this kind of engine for building the collection since minute one. And for my International, 70% of the artists who participated in the show, work by them will enter the collection through the International. I love this. This is the first Carnegie International, which you can see was hung salon style of all these accepted paintings. Yeah. And these are high school students, imagine, in hats. So our procession through painting, please join us if you want to hear a talk. Well, I'm going to go till, like,
At least
yeah.
3 hours.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Uh-huh.
Kidding, 30 minutes.
Puppy downstairs.
Kidding.
So Procession Through Painting ends with Mel Bachner, his text-based paintings. We acquired Do I Have to Draw You a Picture? Mel, one of the founding figures of conceptual art, is from Pittsburgh too. His father was a sign painter. And he also was like Andy Warhol, a tam o' shanter. So now we're going to go around this corner into a space. We're going to pick up the pace here. Into a space. So we've gone from painting to thinking about the space of culture itself. So museums and libraries and archives with the work of Huma Baba, who is down in the Zombies exhibition right now. So Huma is an artist who draws on traditions of the figure from across time and space. So sort of drawing all this energy from the museum itself. And then Dayanita Singh, a photographer who creates these sort of portable museum structures. And this series of images were all taken in archives throughout Rajasthan, where instead of things in folders, papers, manuscripts are wrapped in cloth, these cloth bundles. So from museum and archive, then into a space with nature, with the work of Art Labor and Abel Rodriguez. So Art Labor created a hammock cafe. Every morning from 11 to 1, we serve Vietnamese coffee from a small farm plantation in Vietnam. One of the collective's members' family runs this farm, and who knew that Vietnam is the second largest producer of coffee in the world. They produce a kind of industrial strength coffee that gets used for like instant coffee. And so in this very gentle way, this installation brought us into global coffee trade. And overhead, working with Art Labor, the great American artist Joan Jonas painted these traditional Vietnamese kites. Joan had mentored one of the collective's members, and they asked her to contribute to their installation. And then across from the Hammock Cafe, this work by Abel Rodriguez. Abel is a member of the Nanoya tribal community in the Amazonian rainforest. And so Abel does not identify as a contemporary artist. He is a namer of plants. And so for him, drawing is a language that allows him to make legible to us all that he knows about the plants and what you can eat and what you can't eat and the cycles of the river and the forest. These are extraordinary works, and if you're a scientist, you look at them and you know this is knowledge. It's not some illustration of what the forest might look like. So then we go through this little rat hole into this work by Alex DeCorta. So Alex is a Philadelphia-based artist who I'd worked with when I was in Philadelphia, and I asked Alex to do something spectacular, as I knew he would, for the International. So we'd end this kind of procession in a kind of a world within a world. So Alex built this house out of neon, and the house, remember Alex is from Philadelphia, is a drawing of Benjamin Franklin's house on Independence Plaza in Philadelphia. Here's a ghost house. And then the house is sitting on this sort of candy cobblestone floor, which is a reference to the set from Mr. Rogers' Land of Make-Believe. And I think you all know now where Mr. Rogers is from, Pittsburgh. The Mr. Rogers' Land of Make-Believe was made in the WQED studios right around the corner from the museum. So Alex, and here, inside of the house is this giant television screen. And Alex produced a series of 57, he called them cartoons, videos. So in this one, and they were various durations, some were a minute, some were 20 minutes. Here's Alex DeCorta with his prosthetic face on as Mr. Rogers. So, and he's singing Edelweiss. So these kind of jam-up, mash-ups of references. So you have to think that Alex, like he made all the entire Land of Make-Believe, trolley, the puppets, everything to make this video. So you saw Alex's Bugs Bunny, you saw Alex's Sylvester the Cat on this kind of effed up Frank Stella painting. Here's Bugs Bunny. So it was a very sticky work of art. The video sequence was 3 hours and 3.5 hours. People would go in and not come out. It was a truly magnetic artwork by Alex. And it had in it these references to pop culture that maybe, different generations kind of could access it different ways. It was very emotional. And you can go to Venice if you would like to see all 3.5 hours. The video is going to be part of the Venice Biennale, which opens in May. But our tour continues in the Carnegie Museum of Art, and we're back in the Hall of Sculpture. Now we're here with the work of Post-Commodity. And they created this floor installation. And what is it? It is glass and coal and steel. So Post-Commodity is an indigenous collective, and they say that their work invites us to think about the complexities of the contemporary world through an indigenous lens. So for them, they were interested in Pittsburgh's industrial history. This is Pittsburgh's kind of the materiality of Pittsburgh's industrial past. And the sort of conceptual point of departure for them was a Navajo sand painting, but instead of like little pieces of sand, you got these chunks of these glass, steel, and coal. And Navajo sand painting is it's temporary, as this work will be swept up, but it's also an object of ceremony. So a sand painting is a place for spirits to come and go from this earth. And so there was an element of ceremony to Post-Commodities piece where daily Pittsburgh musician, someone connected to Pittsburgh's great jazz history, would interpret the installation as a musical score. So you can see on his music stand an image of the piece. And so we had all different musicians, we had people vocalizing, people playing conch shells, every horn you can name, so interpreting the piece as music. And when the music would play, another ceremony would take place where these doors, which have been closed since the 1970s, would be opened by the security guards, and this the sound would then travel into the Natural History Museum's Hall of Minerals, and you get these bewildered people come staggering out of the Hall of Minerals into the Hall of Sculpture. And when artists visited the museum and we talked about the International, I talked a lot about this idea of flow and how, as a child going to this museum, all of the parts were contiguous to one another. You could travel freely, for free, from the library to natural history to the art museum. And now these parts have closed off to one another. So, and this space itself then is very significant for the contemporary Carnegie International, because whatever you put here becomes the kind of poster child for your international. So this is the poster child for my international. This is the 2013 Carnegie International. 2008 Carnegie International with Mike Kelly's Candor. Mangelos in the 2004 Carnegie International. I'm showing you these so you can see how dynamic this space is. Martin Kippenberger in 1999, Donald Judd in 1995, and here's Alan McCullum in 1991. And Alan, these are casts of bones from the Museum of Natural History's paleontology collection. So Alan casted bones and made the kind of museum into a boneyard here with this, this floor piece. So this 1991 Carnegie International was curated by Lynn Cook and Mark Francis. And what's significant is this was the first time the museum invited outside curators to come in and organize their historic signature exhibition. So prior to that, the show had been done in-house, usually by the director himself. So Lynn and Mark are invited in, and for me it's a kind of marker of the beginning of a beginning of the contemporary. In 1991, museums didn't have curators of contemporary art on staff, and they didn't have collections of contemporary art. So, and here's the other curators since, all of whom have gone on. Here's Richard Armstrong. He's the curator of the Guggenheim, or the director of the Guggenheim. Madeline Grinstein, director of the MCA Chicago. Anyway, so the shoulders that I stand upon in organizing this international. And I thought about that a lot, about how these exhibitions are a compilation. Like, it's not a parade of internationals, each one sort of supplanting the one that came before, but that we're really building this history of the contemporary, this research, this looking at the contemporary together. And so that's how I write about this Carnegie International in the Dispatch. And this is the catalog for the Carnegie International. I have a copy of it here, which just came out. So it's one of two publications that I created for the show. The first is the guide. And the guide came out shortly before the exhibition opened. And you can see it is small. It's sort of your travel guide to bring you into the exhibition. And the exhibition itself, beside that one wall text that we looked at, had very little verbiage. So here's a wall label. And the wall label would say, see page 50. And you could, if you wanted to, but you didn't have to, you could turn to your guide to page 50 and you could read more about Mel Bachner. So the kind of didactics that would appear on the wall were in this book. And it was your handheld device to navigate the Carnegie International. With the idea of, it was your handheld device to get lost in the Carnegie Museum, in the immense building. So kind of quickly, we're going to move and see how the exhibition really did move out into the museum itself. So here's Karen Kalimnik, the director's favorite artist. And she did an installation in the decorative arts collection where her work, these salon-style installations of her work are kind of flowing around the museum's historic collection of decorative arts. Here's this amazing sculpture installation by a young sculptor, Jesse Reeves, in the museum's architectural center. We have a dedicated center for the study of architecture. And then we also have a collection of architectural fragments, the Hall of Architecture. And here Saba Inab created this sculpture, which is for her a model and a memory of a destroyed tunnel on the Gaza Strip. So she created a kind of new fragment and ruin for the Hall of Architecture. And then in our magnificent Carnegie Music Hall, we screened weekly and a film by Tacita Dean. So Tacita Dean is an artist who works with film, and to show her work, you have to have a projectionist, and it's very specific, the presentation of this film. It was called Event for a Stage, and it was a work that she had made for a black box theater, and she had always envisioned it being in a jewel box theater, so this kind of made Tacita's dream come true. So then we also have we have a hall of miniatures, so these little miniature period rooms. And the artist Jeremy Deller inserted, he called it the world's smallest video installation. So little tiny TVs in the miniature rooms, and they had sort of historic battle reenactments. So Jeremy's idea was kind of like bringing the war back home, all of the Jacobean era, that's kind of as referenced in the antiques, little tiny antiques in here. So then in our also magnificent, the Grand Staircase, a film by Kevin Jerome Everson. It was an 8-hour long, Kevin calls it a shift film. It was a day in a factory in Virginia, and it would begin with the workers arriving and leave with the workers leaving at 5. And it's here very specifically cited, said it was magnificent, the mural program which Carnegie commissioned for this Grand Staircase, this was the original entrance to the museum, is called The Crowning of Labor. And we see men heroically laboring. Here's some men heroically laboring. And they're building the great city, the great industrial city, which looks a heck of a lot like Pittsburgh. And then a captain of industry is being lifted into heaven by showgirls for his good work on earth. He's over there somewhere, so these little snippets. And who does that man resemble but Andrew Carnegie himself? So here's Andrew Carnegie as depicted by Andy Warhol, this giant silkscreen image. And it is, we're seeing it installed in what was an exhibition within the exhibition. So I invited another curator to make a show within the Carnegie International. And that curator is Koya Koya, who runs a space in Dakar, Senegal called the Raw Material Company. It's a space of exhibition, it's a space of conversation, it's a space of teaching curatorial practice. And it's really a space, it's a hub for the transmission of the contemporary. So I invited Koyo to create an exhibition to draw widely and freely across the museums, the art museum's collections and also the natural history museum's collections. And so she made this show, and it's within the permanent collection. You would come across Koyo's kind of intervention installation called Dig Where You Stand. And she specified these walls that were for her both rust-colored, but also the earth of Dakar, Senegal. And it was really a think piece through objects on what Koyo calls her preoccupation, and that is coloniality, not colonialism, but coloniality, which she says is the condition of being occupied. So we can be occupied by governments, we can be occupied in terms of land or territory, but we can be occupied by economies as well. And so she was kind of exploring this idea of coloniality through the museum's collections with an emphasis on Pittsburgh itself. And you saw things together which would otherwise never be together. And for me, there's a kind of work being done here. So the work of the contemporary, and that is that with our museums, with the treasures that museums have, with these objects that we steward, it's time to be telling new stories and to be telling new histories that are addressing diversity and inclusivity and changing and shifting boundaries and this idea of shifting terrain. And so Koyo's work, it kind of was operating as a kind of a think piece, yes, but also a kind of operational model for the museum itself, perhaps, to implement moving forward after the Carnegie International. And here's our Isama Noguchi. So there's the immense building. We looked at a lot of stuff. We haven't looked at all of it. We've looked at most of it. Koyo's show, it's this idea that the museum, through Koyo's exhibition, we might look at it anew. Maybe it's not going to look the same to us after the Carnegie International, but after the way that these objects that are familiar are being used in different ways, seen in different ways. So there's another feature of this museum which will ever be seen anew after the Carnegie International. So around the cornice of the historic building are the names of great white men. So here's Tchaikovsky and Rubinstein and Chopin. So they're musicians and artists and men of science and exploration and engineering. Their names ribboning the building. Tavares Strawn is an artist from the Bahamas. When I invited him to the museum to think about what he'd like to do for the Carnegie International, he was very taken with that engraved entablature, to which he has added for the Carnegie International a register of names of women and people of color who have also contributed to making culture great. So, for instance, Jane Elliott, a radical educator of anti-racism. Here's her. Here we have Matthew Henson, the black polar explorer. There was a little key to all of the names, all 54 names. So, here's Thelonious Monk, the musician. And so wherever there was an engraved name, Tavares inserted a neon name between the engraved name, so not to eclipse, but to illuminate. And on the facade of the building, it says, this museum is dedicated to the people of Pittsburgh by Andrew Carnegie, blah, 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 blah. So Tavares has underlined, this museum is dedicated to all of the people who've been made invisible by the mechanisms of history. It's a very beautiful, powerful piece. Soon it will be gone. It will remain indelible in our memories. And there were 54 names in all, and all were cross-referenced in this. The piece was called the Encyclopedia of Invisibility, and here's the encyclopedia. That Tavares in his studio, as long as I've known Tavares, they've been researching this tome, which you open it. It looks like every encyclopedia you ever copied a research paper from. And there are people, and there are incidents, and there are things that are mostly unknown to you are contained in this volume. So it remains contained. So another work that will kind of echo in the bardo of the Carnegie International is this work by Park MacArthur. It was a sound piece. So here we are in the permanent collection. There was a sort of moment where we stopped and we would hear Park's piece, which she called Pits. And she worked to gather field recordings in a quarry in Norway, and then composed them into this audio piece that you heard. And this quarry is significant because it's where all of the stone that the Carnegie Museum of Art was built from is this Norwegian larvikite. So it's kind of like we're hearing the stone through Park's piece. So these are echoes that can sort of play in our imaginations and memories until the next Carnegie International in 2022, to be curated by someone as yet unnamed. For me, that's the end. I don't know if there's time for questions. Happy to answer.
Thank you for such a wonderful talk. Really appreciated it. I was curious as to how you made the decision of making a book as the guide rather than the typical use your telephone, hit the number, and get the recording.
Okay, so it was like, why not an app? And I knew I didn't want to do an app for a bunch of reasons. One of them is not everybody has a device that they can download the whatever onto. My experience is apps break. They're not reliable. And when I see people in museums, or when I myself have used an app, two things happen. You'll use it at first to be, oh, how interesting, this app, this kind of toy, and then you don't follow through with it. So why invest all that work into something that maybe isn't really going to be fully used? But I think as soon as we start looking at our screens, that's where we go. And then maybe we take a picture and we post it. That's great. Then maybe we start checking our email. And so I with a book, to me, there's a kind of act of reading that is very analogous to looking. And so the book is kind of underscoring that idea of reading. And then the book, too, is, it's like any guide. Some people like a guide, some people don't like a guide. So it was there if you wanted it. And you could check them out like a guide by sell. You could leave your credit card and borrow a guide, or you could buy one for $15, or they were kind of readily sprinkled around as well. Also, I love Baedeker's guides, as 19th century travel guides, and if you look at the guide, you'll see it's like, it's a reincarnation, yeah.
That was what that's what I connected with, was the sense of history in the Carnegie, that there was a traditional way of moving through the exhibition, the way it seemed like your typeface was chosen and your frontis pages and the way it was bound. I really appreciated that sense of age.
So the design had 3 phases, and they were expressed. The first phase was the website, which you got a glimpse of from that page of the Tam O'Shanners, and it had a very kind of typewriter kind of font to it that just looked like the idea of the first phase was we just got to bang this out and just start getting it out there. And so I called that the truss phase, thinking of like a truss bridge, like we just got to get across that river. This was the fuss phase, so everything's kind of ornamental and there's script, and even the name is kind of, you know, the Carnegie International 57th edition. And then this is the final phase, and it has this, it's called catenary, which is a natural line between 2 points, like so a rope bridge is like a catenary. And its font is no fuss. It's very distilled, the design here. And the idea is that this is the exhibition as knowledge going out into the world, but it's also the exhibition as archive. Like now we're done. We're like, I don't know, putting the umbrella down, making way for the next one. So, yeah, here's the, and the dispatch is also where Leslie Hewitt, a photographer, participated in the international. Her work only exists in the dispatch, so it's a container for art. Leslie made a film in the form of still photographs it's a 3-part film, and you'll feel it when you get there. It's a, yeah, so, yeah, thank you for observing that.
So once the artists were chosen, how much time did they have to make their pieces?
So a luxury that you have with the International is I had 3 years to work on this show, and colleagues who work on a biennial, usually by the time you've been picked and you've signed your contract, your checklist is due, and, you know, chop, chop, let's go. So here I had time almost as a material to make the show with artists, and that was my invitation to artists, was to come to Pittsburgh. Don't say yes, just come and check me out, check out the museum, the city, spend some time, and then do you want to make this thing together? And by and large, artists made new work. There were a few works, like Alex was commissioned, Elle's piece was commissioned. By and large, artists too took advantage of that time to make something new with the spaces and the spaces that they were going to occupy.
Yeah, that's very
Yeah.
enriching, and you can see that in so many of the pieces.
And I feel it was a real gift that artists gave to the exhibition. You felt how situated everything was, because artists knew, like, the grandeur of that building. Or Huma, she said this was an opportunity for her to work in relief using the wall, and then to work at that height. So, yeah.
Did you use existing interior architecture, or did you make and adapt the exhibits to the existing architecture, or were you able to create interior architecture for a specific exhibit?
So I really shaped the exhibition in terms of the museum and its spaces, and my early kind of decision processes were about, like, kind of imagining either artists or kinds of looking or speeds, or sort of like kind of the footprint of the museum helped me shape the exhibition and invite artists. And I didn't, we didn't build walls like that platform that Thaddeus's work is on. We built that, but by and large we didn't. We used the spaces as is. And it's interesting. So Laura Hopman, her International, when we were looking at that Hall of Architecture, and you saw the 3, it was very severe, the 3 plinths. She worked with designers, and they really created almost like a space within the museum that was the International. So again, that's something you decide as the curator, like how you want to use the space itself.
What didn't go the way you thought it would, and what did you do?
So John and Lenka, the artist with the 10,632 titles. There's initially, to some artists, I invited them with something particular in mind, which they could reject or would become the point of a departure for a conversation. With John and Lenka, I knew I wanted that space to be active because it's a first space that you experience. And I thought, well, if we have something super contemplative here, that's very nice, but everyone will get very sleepy and that will be it. So I needed kind of something very energetic. So and I floated this idea of like a screen studio, because at the time I was thinking a lot about screens, like television screen and silk screen and screens, and they both have connections to print and dissemination through their work. And so I kept saying, I don't literally mean a screen studio, but there was some little part of me that maybe did. And that was a really hard one because they just didn't want to have something prescribed, and I wasn't really trying to prescribe. But then the first thing they proposed was just so outlandish and expensive and crazy. So like that was a hard one for us to. We both respected where the other side was coming from, but it was really hard to get to where it was. And then when it did, it was like, how could there have been anything else? It was so perfect. So that's sometimes what the curatorial is too, is this kind of, kind of like a tug of war. War, not a good metaphor. Yeah, it's
Give and take.
give and take. Yeah, I mean, they conceived something I would not in a million years would have been able to think of. So, by and large, and there were like moments, touch and go moments, like El Anatsui is an artist who, when you invite him to do something, I was talking to other curators who'd worked with him, he just needs a lot of time and space. So he said, yes, I'll do something, but was it going to be like a pot holder on the front of the museum? Was he going to do the whole thing? We didn't know. It just had to be like, I had to be very cool, like whatever. And it wasn't until the spring, so like in May, that he really decided what he wanted to do, and we had to make this thing. So.
And it was big.
And it was big.
It had a lot of hours in it.
It had a lot of hours in it. So things are happening at different speeds. Like a post-commodity, they came. They were the first artists I invited for a site visit. They chose that space. Within a week, they sent this proposal to do the sand painting, and then they just methodically, realized it, sourcing the materials. Everything has to be fumigated. You have to put a special floor down. So.
Thank you, Ingrid.
That's good.
Thank you.
Okay. All right.